So today is week 3 of the series that we are on called The Real You. And in this series, we're looking at the topic of the soul. So the first week of this series, we kind of tried as much as we could, like we talked about nailing Jello to the wall, to define the soul. What is it? And look at the importance of it. And if you missed that, it's on the website. You can look at that to kind of catch up or get an idea, a working definition of the soul and its importance. Last week, we talked about really the importance of not just the soul, but the importance of a healthy soul by looking at some characteristics of unhealthy souls and then what a healthy soul looks like and how that's much more desirable. We should desire that. So what we're going to do starting this week and in the following 2 weeks is we're going to look at how we can get a healthy soul, how we can make our soul more healthy. So we kind of see what it is, why it's important. We see why a healthy soul is important. And now we're going to kind of look at how do we do that? How do we do that? So what we're going to look at today is the first thing about what our soul needs. And the first thing is to understand your soul is needy. You have a needy soul, okay? And that's not a bad thing. It's actually okay to say that, and it's actually healthy to admit that and own that, because then you can say, okay, what then does my soul need? If it needs something, what is it? The soul's been described like this, and I think it fits this occasion looking at the neediness of the soul. The soul is kind of like the king in chess. Anybody ever play chess? So the king is sort of needy. The king can only move one space at a time, either forward, backward, back and forth, or diagonal. Only one space. Every other piece can move at least two at some time in the game. And the king needs all the pieces around him to protect him, right? Because how do you win chess? You take the other person's king. You trap them. And so that's the king is very needy, but it's the most important piece in the game. It is how you win or lose. That's a pretty good description of the soul. The soul is very needy. It needs certain things, which is what we're going to talk about today in the next couple weeks. And without them, game over. Without them, to have and build a healthy soul, it's not going to go well for us in this life, and probably not in the one yet to come either. So the soul is needy, and that's okay. So the question then is, what does the soul need? The first thing that we're going to look at today in week 3 of this series is that the soul needs a center. The soul, your soul, needs a center. This is foundational for our souls. And this is one of those things that you don't realize that you need it until you don't have it, okay? It's one of those things where you don't know how it's supposed to function until it's becoming dysfunctional. And you're like, wait, something's not right, something's off, something's missing. And then you realize, oh, there is something. I didn't realize it was missing till it was missing. It's one of those kind of weird things. But this will make much more sense as we kind of flesh this idea out today. Before we get to what that center is, let's look at why the soul needs it. We're going to kind of work backwards a little bit today, so just hang on with me. We'll get to where we're going before we're done here. We're going to land the plane safely, and everyone's going to get out and be okay, all right? So why does the soul need a center? And I want to give you 3 characteristics of what an uncentered soul looks like. And I want you to be vulnerable this morning and look deep in your own heart, in your own soul, in your own life, in your own situation, the season that you're in, and see if maybe we're describing situations that you're facing or mindsets that you have that are maybe not healthy, because maybe your soul is off center. So the first characteristic of an uncentered soul is this. A soul without a center has difficulty making decisions. And I'm not talking about like, okay, what do I wear today? Or where we're going to go to lunch. I'm not talking about little things. I'm talking about big life decisions. An uncentered soul has a really hard time navigating those decisions. And we constantly are on edge. And we constantly freak out. And we constantly second guess every decision that we make because our soul's not completely centered in just the right way. Now, big life decisions, even for someone who has a very centered, healthy soul, they're still not easy to make. So don't misunderstand what we're talking about. I'm not saying if you figure out this secret here, your whole life is solved. And decision-making is easy. And it's always clear what you should do. That's never the case. There's always unknowns in life, no matter how wise you are, no matter how long you've lived, and no matter how healthy your soul is. There's always things that take us by surprise. There's always times that we have difficulty making decisions. But an uncentered soul, making decisions is nearly impossible, if not impossible. Let me give you an example from Scripture about this. There's a very powerful Roman official in the New Testament named Pontius Pilate. He was a man who had an uncentered soul, and he had a very important decision to make near the end of the life of Jesus. Basically, the life of Jesus hung in the balance because of this man. So he is the governor, the Roman governor of the province around Jerusalem where Jesus has been arrested by the religious authorities around him. And they bring Jesus to Pilate, and they say, hey, crucify him. And he kind of looks, and he's like, really? Like, what's his crime? What has he done? And they have this dialogue. And so as they're talking and as Pilate talks to Jesus, you kind of get a glimpse into his mind for a second, and you really understand he knows what decision is the right one to make. He knows what to do. He just is not centered inside to be able to make the right decision. Because he knows that Mark even writes in his gospel that Pilate knows pretty quickly, looking at the situation, Mark says that Pilate knew that Jesus was arrested because of envy, because of jealousy. The religious leaders weren't getting enough fame, and Jesus is getting all the attention, all the headlines, and they're like, we got to put a stop to this. And so they say, well, he's saying these things, and we need you to kill him because we can't do it. Pilate knows this is a setup. There's something fishy going on. There's something not right here. In his heart, he knows this. Even his wife gets involved, and she says, hey, honey, I had a nightmare last night, and that man was in my nightmare. You cannot do this. But there's other people at play here, like we've already mentioned. So the Jewish religious leaders are at play, and they're putting huge amounts of pressure on Pilate to crucify Jesus. And they know, their thing is, well, he's a blasphemer. He claims to be God, and that's against our law, so you have to kill him. Pilate's thinking, that's not against Roman law. We serve thousands of gods all the time. That's not a problem. As long as he claims that Caesar is Lord and is God above the other gods, that's fine. So I don't care about your religious law. That doesn't apply to me. I don't have to do anything. But there's another player here in this story, and that is the Roman officials over him. Caesar has said, hey, here's the deal. We're going to clamp down on these people. If there's any rebellions that get out of hand, if you're in charge of that rebellion, you're done. Very quickly and very brutally and very violently. So he has pressure from the people that he's governing to do something that he knows internally is probably not the right thing to do, and he has pressure from above him. Hey, if you don't give them what they want and they revolt and cause problems, it's your head that's on the chopping block. So he's got all these things going on. He's got a huge decision to make. What do I do with this guy? And he can't figure out what he needs to do, even though he knows what he should do. So what he tries to do is he tries to dump the problem off on somebody else. You ever done that before? Kick the can down the what Pilate does, because he says, where's this guy originally from? And they say, well, he's from Galilee, a little village up north. He's great. I know the guy in charge of that province. Take him to that guy. So they try to take him to Herod, who's the leader of that province where Jesus is from originally, and says, problem solved. I didn't have to make a decision. I didn't have to do anything. It's his problem. And then a few hours later, he comes back and says, hey, Herod said he's not going to deal with it. It's your problem. It's like, oh, my goodness. So then Pilate, still not wanting to make a decision because it's probably going to be the wrong one. He's probably going to live with regret and guilt the rest of his life. There may end up being a revolt on the other side, pro-Jesus anyway. He decides, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Every year around this time, I get to release one prisoner to these people, so I'm going to really, make the balance in my favor. So he says, I got Jesus here who seems very harmless and actually completely innocent. And then on the other hand, I've got this guy named Barabbas who is a known, offender. He is terrible. He is the bottom. He is garbage. And so he says, hey, guys, who should I release back into the public where your children live and where your things and houses are? Jesus or Barabbas? And he's thinking, okay, these people aren't complete idiots. They're going to pick the criminal. They're going to say, we don't want him, release Jesus. And I'm going to be, they made the decision for me. But what do? They say, give us Barabbas. We want this convicted felon back on our streets. Yay, kill Jesus. And he's like, this is not going like I planned. This is terrible. So now he actually has to make a decision. And Luke tells us that he knows that he's innocent. And so, Mark says that he ends up crucifying Jesus to pacify the mob. So Pilate has this inner struggle back and forth because he's not centered. And how do we know this? We get a really good look at how his thinking is based on a conversation that he has with Jesus in his trial. So Pilate's asking questions and getting responses, and he's like, this dude is totally innocent. Why are you here? What are you doing? And he asks Jesus a question. He says, so are you saying that you're the king of the Jews? That's what the crime is. You can't set up your own kingdom. We do have a problem with that. And Jesus says, well, you say that I am. Very clever of Jesus. He's a pretty smart guy. And so Jesus goes on to say this, the people that love the truth know that what I speak is the truth. And here's how we get a view of what Pilate's thinking. He says this. He asks the question, what is truth? So Pilate clearly has an uncentered soul. He's seeking out truth, and he's not sure what it is. And he kind of knows which direction he should go in this instance, but he doesn't want to, and he feels pressure, and he just is like, I don't know what to do. So he goes over to this basin of water, literally washes his hands of the situation, and then tells the people, hey, this dude's blood is on you guys. I am clean. I'm doing this because that's what you want me to do, and I want to keep my job. And so he ends up crucifying Jesus. He agonized over this big life decision with someone else's life in the balance, and it was so difficult for him because he was unbalanced in his soul. He knew what to do. He knew how to get there, but he wasn't strong enough to make it happen. There's an unbalanced soul there. An uncentered soul continually lacks direction and purpose in life. An uncentered soul agonizes over every single life decision. And the worst part is, someone with an uncentered soul, even after they make a decision, never feel good about it. And maybe you've been there in part of your life. Okay, I'm going to do this because it's like 60-40, and so I'm just going to go for it. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, if I could take that decision back, I would take it back today. If I could go back in time, or you're like Cher, if I could turn back time, if I could find a way, and you're just, Cher, that's my Cher impersonation, sorry. So maybe you're like Cher and you wish you could turn back time because your uncentered soul led you to make a decision and you're just like, I don't know what to do. There is a better way. So the question is your soul centered or is it waving like a flag in the wind because of how you cannot make decisions? The second characteristic of an uncentered soul is that a soul without center feels constantly vulnerable to people or circumstances. The great theologian Forrest Gump famously said, life is like a box of chocolates. I thought that theologian thing would get a laugh, but it didn't. So, man, tough crowd. Let me give you a different way of putting life. Life is like this. Life is like riding a bull. There are sudden changes in direction and speed that you didn't see coming. You're going up and down. It's a violent roller coaster ride. That's life. And if you can hang on for 8 seconds, you feel like you've done something, right? If I can hang on to the situation for 8 seconds at a time, yay me! That's how life can feel sometimes. It's like riding a bull. And why that is sometimes is because we are kind of like Pilate. We feel like people are judging us or looking at us a certain way or have expectations on us. And this person expects this, but this person expects the opposite. What do I do? And so we base our decisions in our life off of everything and everyone else other than what our soul is really trying to communicate that we should do. So the question is, can our souls handle life? If they can, that probably means you're centered pretty strongly. If not, if we're going everywhere and every way, we just can't ever figure it out, and we always feel like a failure and always feel like less than, always feel like we don't measure up, it probably means something's not centered. So let me ask you this. How do you handle a bad hair day? Right? Even things like that can just ruin your entire day. And the less centered your soul is, the more it will mess with you. Maybe, you get stuck in traffic one day this week and you're just like, oh, I can't do this. I can't handle it. I'm going to be late. I'm going to freak out and all this. Again, a centered soul is still going to sometimes struggle with those things, but an uncentered soul is going to totally flip out. It's going to ruin your entire week. And then what if it's a fender bender on the way to work? Then that's just way different. What if you get unfriended on Facebook? An uncentered soul is going to lose it. They're going to just obsess about that for days. Why did they do that? Did I post something that was offensive to them? Did I hurt their feelings? Are they not my real friend anymore? Like even little things in life. Too often, we are too bothered by too many things. That's not to say that emotions are wrong or that we can't have a reaction. In fact, if we don't, something probably is wrong. Like if you get a doctor's report that you weren't expecting and you're like, and you're not affected by that at all, you should probably go to a different doctor to check your mind because there's something wrong with you. Like if you get laid off from work and you're like, this is a great day, there's probably something wrong with you. You should probably be affected by things that happen in life, but not to a degree that you can't recover. Failure should maybe upset you a little bit and motivate you to continue to move on and get better and be better, but it shouldn't knock you down for months or years at a time. And the less centered our soul is, the more it happens to do that. And so we want to have a centered soul emotions are okay, but an uncentered soul is run by emotion. Run by emotion. Constantly looking for others' approval, can't cope with change, can't recover from disappointment, lives with a constant sense of dread or deep despair over the uncertainty of the future. Again, emotions are okay, but we have to keep them in check. And an uncentered soul is incapable of doing that very well for very long. So I hope this doesn't describe you, but if it does, there's hope for your soul. There is a center for your soul. The third characteristic of a soul without a center is that it lacks patience. A soul without a center lacks patience. Now, that can mean short-term things. It can mean you have an anger or a rage issue. That's part of an uncentered soul. It can mean that every little thing just throws you off and you lose it, fly off the handle, and you have these issues that you need to work on. It can result in that. But more importantly, it's the long-term things that a soul without a center lacking patience has issues with, mainly long-term. So things like impulsive behavior or bad decision-making, those things along the way add up to huge pivots in your life, huge moments in your life that will lead to places you didn't intend to go 20 years ago, but because I lacked patience, because I lacked a center in my soul, this little thing added on to that one, and now how did I get here, and how did my life become this way? Let me give you two examples from Scripture, the Old Testament on this. First is King Saul, the first king of Israel. He was a guy that lacked patience, big time, and twice, really, in his life, it got him in big trouble long term. So there's an instance where Saul is kind of a new king. It seems like it's one of the first things recorded about him. There's about to be this huge battle with the Philistine army, the main nemesis of Israel for hundreds of years. And they're kind of on one hill, and the Philistines are on the other hill, and they're just ready for someone to say go. You know, who's going to fire the first shot? But the prophet of Israel, Samuel, has told King Saul, hey, you don't do anything until I get there and make a sacrifice before this battle starts. Don't do anything. Nearly a week goes by, and they're standing here looking at the enemy across the valley from them, and some guys panic, it says, and they run away. They run and hide in caves, and they go back home, and they're like, I'm out. They're going to ambush. They're making a plan. We're not going to make it. Samuel's never going to come. We're going to get destroyed. So they start leaving. And so Saul gets impatient. He says, I'm not waiting for Samuel anymore. He says, bring the bull over here. I'll do it myself. I was a butcher growing up. I'm fine. I know how to do this. That's no problem. And so he makes the sacrifice. And wouldn't you know it, as timing would just happen to be, it says, just as he finished making the sacrifice, who comes running down the street? Samuel. And he says, hey, I smell barbecue. What's the deal, Saul? And he said, well, you know, we've been waiting for you for a long time. I didn't think you were coming. The men started to freak out, and they left. And I thought, if any more guys leave, we're not going to make it. And so because they all freaked out, I got impatient. I made the sacrifice. But it's fine. We're fine. Everything's fine. And Samuel's like, everything's not fine. And he says, let me tell you how not fine it is. The Lord has a message from me to you, and here's what it is. Your kingdom is over. Like your son, not going to be the king. He's already chosen somebody else because you were impatient. So Saul's impatient. He's like, he burnt a bull, and like to God, he's worshiped to God. What's the big deal? Well, it was disobedience through impatience. And so it cost Saul his entire legacy. His son, Jonathan, never got to be king. And it cost him everything. His impatience, one little decision cost him so much. Second example from earlier in Scripture is a guy named Samson. Maybe you've heard of Samson before. He's known for his superhuman strength and all these things that he could do, his long hair and all that kind of stuff. Fabio of the Old Testament, if you will, right? So Samson was called by God from birth. He's saying, hey, you remember these Philistine guys that are causing you issues? This guy, Samson, he's going to destroy all of them. He's going to be the man to lead this movement, and they're going to be just a crater in the earth when he's through with them. So that's why God gave him this supernatural strength to just tear these guys limb to limb with his bare hands. But Samson lived a life of continual impatience. And with him, it was mainly with relationships. He went from bad relationship to bad relationship. Let me give you the first one. So he goes to the land of the Philistines. They are the enemy. Okay? He's trying to destroy them. But he finds a woman in this land that he falls in love with. He's met her for like 2 days, meets her at a bar. Hey, lady, let's get married. Literally finds a lady from the enemy and says, let's get married. And she's like, sure, you're a hunk of burning love. Let's do this thing, baby. And so they decide they're going to get married. Yeah, I knew you'd like that, Shirley. Elvis #1 super fan over here. So they decide, they met like literally for a couple days. Let's get married. Okay, cool. But then her dad, who's kind of a smart guy, he kind of does a little switcheroo here. So Samson's gone for a while. So while he's gone, she's kind of like, oh, he doesn't love me anymore, and he hates me. And so his dad says, why don't you go marry this guy instead? And she does. So when Samson comes back and he's like, hey, dude, where's your daughter? Where's my wife? Oh, yeah, I kind of gave her in marriage to this other guy. He's like, what? And so he ends up basically killing half the town out of rage. Samson does. His impatience cost him this relationship. He got into it too quickly. He didn't think about who she was, where she's from, what's my mission. I'm supposed to probably kill her, not marry her. It's not going to work out too long. This is a too long distance of a relationship here. So then what does he do? He goes and he finds yet another woman very soon after, and her name's Delilah. Probably know her, right? Same kind of thing. Immediately, love at first sight. Again, she's the enemy here. What are you doing? Haven't you learned from it last time? No, I'm just impulsive. No, I'm just impatient. No, I just want to do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it. I don't really think about roadblocks or road signs or caution signs or yellow flags or yellow lights. I don't care. I'm just going to run through life like a bull in a china shop because I'm Samson and nothing will harm or hurt me. It didn't happen that way because she ends up betraying him too, so much so that then he's arrested by the Philistines that he's supposed to conquer. They cut his hair. His strength is gone. He's arrested. His eyes are gouged out, and he becomes part of a freak show. He goes on parade through town. We caught Samson, the great Samson. Come to the tent thing, and you'll see the circus. It's Samson the Great. He's not so great. Doesn't have any eyes and any strength and any hair, but other than that, he's great. And people paid admission to come see this freak show who used to be this great, mighty man of God. His impatience cost him everything. At the end of his life, he's there, again, as a spectacle, and he prays, hey, God, one more time, give me supernatural strength, and I'll pull these pillars down off of this building and crush all the Philistines to death. God grants his request, but what happens? He dies in the process. His impatience in relationships time after time after time, over and over, his impulsive behavior cost him his strength, cost him his sight, cost him his life, and ultimately his legacy. Because when you think of Samson, that's what you think of. Oh, the guy that got his hair cut. That's not how that was supposed to go for him. His story was supposed to be he destroyed this entire people group by himself because God empowered him to do so. But his impulsive, erratic, impatient behavior cost him everything. An uncentered soul behaves in the same exact way. Let me give you some current examples of what that might look like. Someone who lacks patience would just quit a job on a whim because they're unhappy. They haven't lined up the next gig. They have no money in the bank to then draw from while they're jobless. They just decide, I'm not happy here, I quit. Probably not a great idea. Or maybe it looks like this. Someone who would quickly enter a business deal with someone that they don't know that well because it sounds like a great opportunity. I don't want to miss out on this. It's going to, I have to buy now or, I'm going to pay later. And what happens is if that relationship deteriorates, it gets messy and it gets legal and there's a lot of things that happen and things fall apart. Or maybe you enter this business too quickly, too soon without any experience or know-how and it all gets over your head and you're like, I don't know what to do, and you freak out and you lose everything. Someone who lacks a center in their soul without patience, sometimes, like Samson, goes too fast in relationships. But we're in love. That's the excuse that you hear all the time. But we're in love. So what? Have you thought about who this person is? Have you thought about if you're compatible? Have you thought about if you could spend your life with them or 10 minutes in the same room with them? No, you haven't. You should not do this, right? But we do it all the time. We see it all the time. And then we see the benefit or the trouble that we should have had the benefit of by doing what Saul and Samson did. They ignored roadblocks along the way. People trying to tell them, don't do it. The Holy Spirit's saying, don't do it. And that's part of that pride issue that works with this patience. I want to do what I want to do, when I want to do it, how I want to do it. But again, don't do it. Don't do it. Because an uncentered soul lacks patience, and then the damage is just untold in our lives. So again, the soul needs a center. And without a soul, our life is a sinkhole. things are going to fall apart. The weight of life that you can't handle eventually will crumble into a mess. People will get hurt. Things will happen that you can't undo, that you can't unsay, that you can't get in a time machine and fix. No amount of work is going to undo. You can maybe sort of repair the damage, but you can't undo what's been done. It'll take you years to earn back trust. It'll take you years to earn back that money. It'll take you years to earn back your reputation. It'll take time, if it even ever happens. An uncentered soul is like a sinkhole. Or it's like this. Jesus tells a story, he tells a parable about two men that wanted to build houses. One built a house on the sand, not the greatest source of a center here. One guy built a house on a rock or a foundation that's been laid for the purpose of building a house. So guess what happens? When the rains and floods come, the house on the rock is still there, standing strong. When the rains and the floods come, the house on the sand is gone. That's what a centered soul versus an uncentered soul looks like. So let's look then at what a centered soul is. Let me just say this very quickly. This is not going to be a surprise to anyone. Your soul needs a center, and that center must be Jesus. Surprise, you're at church today, and you're hearing that your center of your life should be on Jesus. This is not a shock. This is not like a, whoa, what's he going to get? What's he getting at here? It's very clear, but again, it's so easy to become uncentered. It's so easy to, again, base your life off of a prayer that was prayed years ago, but my life's really not currently centered on Jesus. That's why I have all these issues in my life. That's why I make these bad decisions that are impulsive. That's why I can't make decisions in my life. That's why everything's falling apart, because maybe I've gotten off center even just a little bit. Maybe I used to be really devoted to Jesus, and now I've kind of faded, and I've tried to do life on my own, and it's kind of sinking in, and I see the cracks forming, and I see, oh, it's vulnerable here. This is not good. So today's just a good reminder. It's not just a one-time thing that everything's great now. It's like, no, it's a daily thing. It's a daily centering of your life on Jesus. So let's look at the opposite of that, just a few scriptures as we kind of start wrapping it up here today. Matthew 6:24, Jesus says this, "No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." So you can't center your life on stuff, is what Jesus is saying. You can't revolve your life around your things. They are temporary. They will cave in like everything else around you when your life falls apart. It cannot be the here and now. It cannot be your center. Galatians 1, verse 10, Paul says this, "Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God?" That's a great question to ask yourself maybe every day in the mirror before you leave the house. "Or am I trying to please people?" And Paul says this, "If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ." Because Paul's conversion made him an enemy of a lot of people that used to be his friends. Maybe you know exactly what I'm talking about. Making that faith decision cost him a lot. He changed who he was completely for the better, but it did cost him things. And if he had built his life around the approval of people, he never would have made it. If he tried to build his life around what people thought about him or how they perceived him, he never would have made it. And he admits that, and we have to admit the same thing. Joshua 24, verses 14 and 15. So Joshua is the leader after Moses. This is his farewell address. He's about to die. He's over 100 years old. And here's what he says. Here's his last word as leader of Israel. He says, "Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods of your ancestors that the ancestors worshiped beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord." He gives him an option here. He says, "But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve." Let me stop there for a second. Everybody serves something or someone. Everybody. Non-religious people serve something. They revolve their life around something. They center their lives around something. Atheists serve something. Every other religion, apart from Christianity, serves something. Christians serve someone. So you either serve something or someone. That's the center of who your life is built on. That's what he's saying. You don't have to worship the one true God, but you're going to serve something. You're going to serve someone, and you're going to see the results here. He says here, choose whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates River or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. So our center cannot be our desires, is what he's saying, cannot be our ways, our preferences. It's got to be something more concrete than that. Because my desires change from time to time. Like when I was 10 years old, I wanted G.I. Joes. Not really into that as much anymore, so my desires have changed. And I'm guessing in the next 20 years, they will change again. So if I base my life on what I want right now, it's going to crumble. It's going to sinkhole into destruction. It's got to be more than that. So what I want to look at for just a few minutes as we close it is I want to read through Psalm 84. And I was just going to read a couple verses, but as I kept looking, I was like, the whole thing is just really good, and it's not that long. We're just going to walk through it for a couple minutes, and this is what a centered soul, a soul that is centered on God, can look like. This is what your life can look like. So let's look at this just for a few minutes as we close today. It says this, how lovely is your dwelling place, Lord Almighty. My soul, it's important, my soul yearns, even faints, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. Again, we are made by God for God. That's why he must be at the center. He must be the center of your soul. Nothing else will satisfy. He goes on to say, even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may have her young, a place near your altar, Lord Almighty, my King and my God. So God invites the simple and the lowly close to him. No one else will do that for you in your life. Very few, if any, will do that, not to the degree that God will. Blessed are those who dwell in your house. They are ever praising you. Blessed are those whose strength is in you, whose heart are set on pilgrimage. So why are they blessed? How are they blessed? He goes on to say this. As they pass through the valley of Baca, they make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. That word Baca is translated into weeping. Read that again. As they pass through the valley of weeping, they make it a place of springs. An uncentered soul cannot cope with life. This valley of weeping will destroy that person. The cares of life will destroy that person. The pressures of others and expectations will destroy an uncentered soul. But someone who is centered on God can pass through the valley of weeping and make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. They go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion. Hear my prayer, Lord God Almighty. Listen to me, God of Jacob. Look on our shield, O God. So God offers protection. If your soul is centered, it's protected. Look on with favor on your anointed one. Look at these words are important. A centered soul can experience these blessings that an uncentered soul not founded on God cannot experience. It says this, better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. That'd make a great song, wouldn't it? Let's work on that, Stephen. I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked. So here's what he's saying. God as the center of your soul is better than any other alternative you can imagine. It doesn't seem like much. It doesn't look like much. It doesn't feel much different, but it's a huge difference. That foundation of Christ in your life is everything. And then he ends the psalm by saying this, 4 things that he looks at here. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. He is direction and protection. The Lord bestows favor and honor. That's your reputation. No good thing does he withhold from those whose walk is blameless. That's provision. Lord Almighty, blessed is the one who trusts in you. So a centered soul from God receives direction, protection, a reputation from God. That's the best you can ever have. Who cares what anyone else says about you if God, opposed to what God says about you? That's something we have to understand. And then provision. So whatever you worry about, whatever you fear about, whatever you toil over and work for, a centered soul can find that as they're centered on God. A soul centered on God has wisdom and patience for all of life's decisions and God's favor and provision to face any circumstance. And again, let me stress this as we close. This is not just I am a Christian because I prayed a prayer one time. It is I am currently, consistently founding my life, my decisions, my relationships, my business, everything I do is centered on Christ, founded on Christ, stamped with his seal of approval. I'm not going to move till he says move. I'm not going to stop till he says stop. If he says left, I'm going to go left. If he says right, I'm going to go right. Everything I am, everything I do, inside and out, is based on, grounded on Christ. Today, that's true. And then tomorrow, it's got to be equally true. This foundation is important. So give your soul what it really needs, and that is a center, and his name is Jesus Christ.